Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Duthier. Anne-Marie Green is off today. The feud between President Trump and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi escalated in front of the entire country last night. The House Speaker ripped up her copy of the president's State of the Union address after he finished talking on camera. This happened after the president refused to shake her hand when he first arrived. Aside from the drama, President Trump mainly touted the economy and stuck to top policy priorities as he fights for re-election. Weijia Jiang has the highlights.
The tension between President Trump and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi was on display from the beginning when the president appeared to snub Pelosi's handshake, and she left out the customary high privilege and distinct honor when introducing Mr. Trump.
Members of Congress, the President of the United States.
And while President Trump stayed focused on expected policy topics,
jobs are booming, incomes are soaring, poverty is plummeting, $2.2 trillion in the United States military. The bloodthirsty killer known as al-Baghdadi is dead.
There were several made-for-TV moments throughout the evening, awarding a scholarship for a young high school student.
You will soon be heading to the school of your choice.
The Presidential Medal of Freedom to conservative radio host Rush Limbaugh.
He is here with us tonight, and we couldn't keep him waiting any longer.
And setting up a reunion between a deployed service member and his family. That drew a rare bipartisan applause. But throughout the night, Speaker Pelosi visibly expressed her disapproval of several of the president's claims, including this one about health care.
We will always protect patients with pre-existing conditions.
The Trump administration has argued in court that all of the Affordable Care Act should be invalidated, including its protections for pre-existing conditions. Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, a state Mr. Trump barely won in 2016, struck back as she delivered the official Democratic response.
Democrats are trying to make your health care better. Republicans in Washington are trying to take it away.
Well, thank you very much.
But the unofficial response came from Speaker Pelosi, who stood up and ripped President Trump's speech the minute he was done.
Trump's speech tonight.
Why did you rip the speech up, Madam Speaker? Why did
it was the dirtiest thing to do.
Republicans criticized Pelosi for being petty and lacking bipartisanship.
So far, she hasn't shown an interest in working with him.
All right, Weijia Jiang is joining me now from the White House. So Weijia, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tweeted a picture of the President of the United States snubbing her handshake with the caption, "Democrats will never stop extending the hand of friendship to get the job done for the people." There is that picture. She went on to say, "We will work to find common ground where we can, but we'll stand our ground where we cannot." So this is all anybody has been talking about over the last couple of hours. What are you hearing from the White House? Because we haven't seen much from the president as far as his tweets, but I'm sure they're going to be coming.
Well, Vlad, this morning the president is on a retweeting spree, and so far most of the messages that he's supporting are criticizing what Speaker Pelosi did. But the White House says that she essentially ripped up all the guests of honor who were at the speech yesterday and claimed that that is her legacy. But as you point out, we are waiting for the president to craft some sort of original message about this, because it is the moment from his speech that everybody is talking about. But I do want to point out that, when I was watching this, and especially in the beginning, the other snub that everyone's talking about, it's hard to tell if President Trump actually saw her extending her hand, but certainly at the very least it suggests that he wasn't planning to shake her hand at all either, because he didn't extend his hand out. But definitely Democrats are saying, make no mistake, that was an insult, and that is what set the tone for the entire night, which ultimately, of course, led to this rip that everyone can't stop talking about this morning.
Yeah, and there was also her non-traditional greeting to the President of the United States in the House chamber there, but also the President in snubbing, I guess, Pelosi, if that's what he intended to do, also didn't shake the hand of the Vice President, I note. But Weijia, you in your reporting, you pointed out just one of the mischaracterizations the President touted yesterday during his State of the Union address with regards to his health care plans. He also, I spent 20 years on Wall Street before I became a journalist. So I went back and looked at some of the numbers that he touted as far as the economy is concerned. And he, for example, said, "I'm thrilled to report to you tonight that our economy is the best that it's ever been." Well, that's simply not true. I mean, the economy, for example, if you look at the unemployment rate during the president's term, the rate has fallen to a low of 3.5% under President Trump, but it was as low as 2.5% in 1953. When it comes to growth of the economy, the president has never achieved an annual growth rate above 3%. In 1997, 1998, 1999, GDP grew 4.5%, 4.7%. Growth between 62 and 66 ranged from 4.4% to 6%. The president says, since my election, we've created 7 million new jobs. Again, those numbers are inflated. So there are a lot of things that the president said during his speech that were just simply wrong. And I wonder, given some of those mischaracterizations that the president made, is that what we can expect to hear, though, as he goes out on the campaign trail making the pitch for re-election?
100%. I mean, his advisors, both here at the White House and in his campaign, have told him, stick to the economy. That is your strong suit. And even though, he fudges the numbers here and there, as you so rightfully point out, the bottom line is the economy is strong, maybe not as strong as he claims. In fact, in 2019, the growth was just 2.3%, and it missed that 3% mark that he had promised before. But at the end of the day, he really believes that people are better off than they were before he took office with regard to how much money they have, their disposable income, their level of comfort with, their job security. And so this is what he will tout on the campaign trail moving forward. It's also exactly why he did not mention the I word during this entire address. Of course, leading up to it, the big question was whether he was going to mention impeachment. And, in the end, he decided not to, because this was really about laying out his accomplishments, making the case that he deserves 4 more years. And we know that he's not proud of impeachment. He has said many times no president wants to be impeached. And so he didn't want to draw any sort of negative attention to the fact that his trial is still underway. But moving forward, I do expect he will bring up impeachment during campaign speeches, as he has in the past, because that is another point of contention that really riles up his base.
Weijia Jiang from the White House. It's a great way for us to segue to our Nancy Cordes. Weijia, as always, we thank you.
Sure.
All right, let's bring in CBS News chief congressional correspondent Nancy Cordes. She's joining me now from Capitol Hill. So, Nancy, first to the State of the Union. You've covered House Speaker Pelosi for years. My impression as I was watching it, Nancy, is there were moments where she almost looked bewildered by what she was hearing. And I know that people have made, sort of pointed out that she had these facial expressions on her face. But in my mind, they seemed as if she almost could not believe some of the things that she was hearing. What's your impression, knowing her, having covered her for so long? And what are you hearing from her people as to what she was thinking, what was going through her mind?
Well, Vlad, to my eyes, she was clearly registering her disapproval of the speech long before she actually ripped up the pages of the speech, not once, but twice, for good measure. She mouthed reactions to a couple of lines in the speech as the president went along, essentially to say, the certain things he was saying weren't true. And at various points, she was kind of holding the speech up to her and reading it like this and kind of flipping through the pages, which didn't go unnoticed either. Somebody even joked on Twitter that it was like she was looking at a menu and trying to figure out whether she wanted the fish or the chicken. Typically, she has sort of mastered in previous speeches the art of just sort of, having an expressionless look on her face and looking ahead. And frankly, she is someone who has repeatedly lectured her party about decorum and told them that there are certain times to get fired up, and there are certain times that you want to sort of sit on your hands and not make a big statement, which is why the fact that she did rip up the speech at the end was so surprising. Some Democrats this morning are telling us, hey, there were parts of the speech that we found just to be completely untrue, so she's justified in doing that. But I talked to another Democratic lawmaker, Vlad, who said to me that he was surprised and that we need to be better than President Trump is, that President Trump will pass and we need to uphold a higher standard. So there is a concern that, perhaps she ceded a little of the moral high ground that she has been so scrupulous about maintaining throughout this impeachment process, insisting that she holds no personal animus towards the president, only to take that very personal step at the end of the speech last night.
And there were even other snubs, I guess, if you will, Nancy. Congressman Tim Ryan walked out of the State of the Union address.
Right.
You had all of the women. It was really striking. It is striking when you see the number of women, the number of people of color on the Democratic side. The women were all wearing white. And as you pointed out, in the past, Speaker Pelosi has sort of given them the, calm down, look. And she really didn't do that this time around. And I wonder if, as we head into the 2020 election, perhaps the message from some Democrats is, we've got to go toe-to-toe with the Republicans. And if that means that we sometimes come across as bullying as the president does, then so be it.
Sure. I mean, it's possible that she and some of her members just reached a breaking point. But the question is, then what now? What happens now? You've got a member of Republican leadership, Liz Cheney, saying this morning that Speaker Pelosi disgraced herself, dishonored the House. She's an embarrassment and unfit for office. This is an individual who has to work with Speaker Pelosi as a member of leadership. So, the tenor of the debate has become so sharply personal between the two sides. You had Democrats yelling at the president at various points in his speech last night when they felt that things that he was saying were untrue. You had Republicans chanting 4 more years, which is something I've never seen at a State of the Union address.
Yeah.
So things really got off to a partisan start and went downhill from there.
So, Nancy, real quick then, I wonder, is there, for the American people who are watching this, are there things that politicians will do for effect? For example, the statement from Liz Cheney is such that the president will see that. He'll say, there's another one of my party that is sticking up for me. But behind the scenes, for example, when it comes to the USMCA, they are able to get some things done. That was a bipartisan bill that got through the House and then was signed by the president.
It was, but there aren't that many bipartisan initiatives to point to beyond it. Yes, criminal justice reform was a biggie about a year ago, but there's really nothing to look ahead to. The two sides are not really attempting to take on major legislative initiatives, even on things that they agree about. The House has been passing progressive legislation on any manner of subjects. Those bills are not going to go anywhere in the Republican-controlled Senate, and there really is no attempt to try to find bipartisan solutions at this point to some of the nation's biggest problems, because there is so much bad blood on either side. And I think, it's not surprising, given the fact that we have now gone through what is essentially a 4-month period where this entire body has been paralyzed by impeachment. And so, temperatures are running high. People are angry at one another. And I think you saw that spill over into public view last night, even though the president himself kept to his word and did not bring up impeachment. It was clearly on everyone else's mind.
All right. Nancy Cordes for us on Capitol Hill. Nancy, we'll check in with you later. There's bound to be more. Thank you.
Sounds great.
Okay, let's bring in CBS News legal analyst Rikki Klieman for more on what we can expect on today's vote in the Senate in what is certainly turning out to be a barnstormer of a political season, Rikki, as we wrap up the impeachment trial of the president today. So the president, as you know, in the past, Rikki, has talked about not only being acquitted, but also being exonerated from the impeachment process. Can you explain to our viewers, because the president will take to the campaign trail, and if there are some Democrats who vote with the majority, that will be even more of an opportunity for the president to say, see, I was acquitted in a bipartisan manner, and perhaps using that language of exoneration. What is the difference for our viewers to understand?
Well, there is a difference. It will not stop the president from saying he was exonerated in the same way that he said he was exonerated after the Mueller report came out, where he clearly was not, quote unquote, exonerated, because there was language in the Mueller report having to do with various acts of obstruction of justice, where Robert Mueller decided not to come to the ultimate conclusion and leave it for another body to decide. What you have here is the difference between an acquittal and exoneration. If you are acquitted, of course you have the right to say, legally, as well as just extemporaneously and bombastically, if you choose, to say that you were acquitted, that in essence, in a criminal trial, you're found not guilty, not responsible for these two charges in the House resolution. Being exonerated is another matter. If someone is in a court of law, the burden is on the prosecution to prove them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So you could suspect someone is guilty, you can believe someone is guilty, you can think in your heart of hearts they're guilty, but unless the prosecution has proved them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, you must acquit. Here we have examples of many, well, not many, a few of the senators who have gone to the microphone and have said that what they thought the president did was inappropriate, it was wrong, but nevertheless, that for other reasons, they were not going to vote to go forward with witnesses, and they will not go forward to vote for, they will go forward to vote for an acquittal. So if he wants to say he's exonerated, we know he will. But there is a very reasonable and correct argument that, yes, he is acquitted, no, he is not exonerated.
So if the president is acquitted, would that have any impact, given that impeachment is a political exercise?
Yes.
If the president is acquitted, would that have any bearing on how he applies his power, how he applies the power of the executive branch?
Well, what we fear, I think, or what the Democrats certainly fear, but I think that even people like John Kelly fear, who was the former chief of staff to the president, is that now there are no guardrails. There is no one to say that you cannot do something. And the president will take this, as will people like Rudy Giuliani and others, to mean that, yes, of course, you can go ask a foreign government for information that would have an effect on the election in 2020. So if you were able to do it with Ukraine and not wind up being impeached, why can't you do it with China? Why can't you do it with Saudi Arabia? Why can't you do it with other nations who would have information for you potentially? And of course, why can't you just get together with Russia and get information? So I think there are no guardrails left once you have been acquitted.
You know, what I'll be looking for, Rikki, is to see members of Congress and how they characterize what ultimately transpires today. If members of Congress and the Senate, many of whom are lawyers, go on the stump for the president or in talking to their constituents, use the language of exoneration, then that will be interesting to see.
And I think before you let me go, I think we should also just mention the fact that there is a possibility that you could have a Democrat or two. We're going to be looking at Joe Manchin. We're going to be looking at Doug Jones, who could possibly vote for an acquittal, and that would really be a benefit to the president.
Indeed. And for all that high drama that you are teasing for us, Rikki, thank you very much for stopping by. Yeah, you want to be sure to join us, as you just heard Rikki, at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, because we will have a special live preview coverage of today's historic impeachment vote. The vote will follow at 4 p.m.